Good morning, everyone. Again, welcome. This morning we're going to be talking about greed and money. Somehow they always seem to go together in our day and age, and even in Jesus' day and age. Both in our world and in Jesus' world, greed and money tend to go together. And one of the most talked about subjects in the Bible is money, and so it's not surprising that Jesus addresses it every now and then. So in today's set of scriptures, it would appear that money and greed are the main topics, but I want you to pay attention to what I read to you and see if you can discern whether indeed greed and money are the main topic, or is Jesus addressing something with money and greed as a peripheral topic and something altogether different as a center stage? See if you can recognize it as we read through the scriptures. I'm going to be reading from the ESV this morning, English Standard Version. And this is Jesus, and let me set the stage a little bit for you. Jesus is, as usual, has a crowd around him. I mean, he did so many miracles, he did so many different things that he always drew a crowd. And so this is no different. He's in a situation where he has a crowd around him, and for some reason, a gentleman walks up to him and asks him a question. So this is the setting for what's about to transpire. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care." And he's talking to the crowd again here. He says, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable or a story. So it's story time. I love story time. We talk a lot about story time. He said, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I will build bigger barns. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. It's time to relax, to eat, to drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be now? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" All right, that's our passage for today. Did you catch it? Did you see it? Was this about greed and money, or was it about something altogether different? Let's start with verses 13 through 15. Welcome, Dave. So it says, someone in the crowd, it doesn't specify who, just someone in the crowd, said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? It's not my job. I'm not going to do it." And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." So, Jesus was approached by this man. And he's looking for Jesus' help with a family squabble, because that's what this amounted to. Older brother, younger brother, they have a dispute over money and finances. The issue seems to be about how much of the father's assets each of the children received. In our society today, we have a system set up to manage this, right? The issue we deal with, which inevitably arises when someone passes away, is who gets what. And we call that system a will. And then an individual is appointed as executor to that will. So, for example, when LaVonna passes away, we have an executor in the family set up. The will is in place, the executor is set up so that when she does pass away, everything will have been planned out. Everybody kind of knows what to expect. There is no issues, no problems. Everything will move smoothly through. And the job of the executor is to marshal all of the assets safely to each of the individuals and to satisfy all of the debts. But even with everything spelled out, even with everything in place, a lot of times there are still feelings of injustice and unfairness after everything is distributed. Many movies have been made about this. Many stories have been written about this. It's just the nature, the human nature that exists out there. People want more. They feel like they deserve more. That this family member should have gotten this and I should have gotten this, right? This is a situation that Jesus found himself in, being approached by this man. In Jesus' day, when the father died, the inheritance was distributed among the children. And in this case, the younger son received what was due him, but he wanted more. He felt like it was due him. I deserve more than I got. And it was normal for the older son to receive more than the younger son. And this younger brother received what was due him by the cultural norms of his day. But guess what? As I mentioned earlier, he wanted more. So the younger brother approached Jesus with a question of greed, cloaked in a dispute over fairness. Jesus chose not to intervene, which was a smart move, right? It wasn't his job. So Jesus says, I'm not going to intervene on the behalf of the younger brother. I am not the executor of the estate. You should have appointed somebody as executor of the estate, and it wouldn't have been a problem. Maybe they did. Maybe we just don't see it. Maybe it's not written there that there was an executor, but still the younger son felt like he didn't get what he deserved. It doesn't really say. But instead of all that, Jesus takes time to tell a story that we call a parable. So it's story time. And I've shared this over and over again, but it's story time. So we're going to get a story this morning. And his goal is addressing the issue of the matter. Let's take a look at this, he's saying. Let's take a look at the heart of the matter. What's really going on here? What's really happening here? This is lesson time. So let's see what we can get out of this story that we see in front of us. Let's see what we can get out of the greed, out of the money issue. First thing we need to look at is, again, verse 16, the last part. It says, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. So a couple things to note here. One, apparently he owned the land outright. There were no encumbrances. There were no debts to be paid on this land. He owned the land outright. So this is part of the parable. He owned the land outright. There was no mention of corruption, false dealings. He was also not a lazy man, because for a piece of land to produce plentifully, a lot of work goes into that. It doesn't just happen, because let me give you an example. I have a stretch of land on our property that it's pretty easy to keep it clear. You just got to mow it and maintain it, right? But if you're slothful or lazy, which I was last year, right? I didn't get in there and mow it like I should have. I went in there this year. I had grass, weeds up to here. I had to spend a whole day knocking all that down because I was lazy or slothful, as they put it. I didn't get in there with my mower and mow it, right? It would have not been a hard thing to do, but when you're not paying attention, when you are a rabbit, right, then all of a sudden you got weeds up to here. But it says that the land produced plenty, which means he wasn't a lazy man. He was paying attention, and it was producing really well. The problem, let's take a look at the problem. It says in 17a, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? I've got a problem here. What am I going to do about it? And the first thing we notice here is that he asks himself this question. He doesn't ask God this question. He asks himself this question. What am I going to do? I've got all of these crops coming in, and I have a problem. Not sure what I'm going to do about it. But you notice he doesn't ask God that question. He asks himself that question. What am I going to do about this? Apparently didn't occur to him to include God in his plans. First mistake. First problem. Don't include God. Bigger problem, right? Include God. Smaller problem. From the big decisions in life to the little decisions in life, God should be our first source and not our last. The better question might have been, God, how can I serve you with this wealth that you may be blessed as well as me? The second thing to note is that it's during time, and then this is really an important concept to keep in mind in our lives, and that is it's during times of prosperity, not need, that we need God more. It's during times of prosperity that we need God more than during times of need. Why? Because it's during times of prosperity that we tend to wander from God and be self-sufficient. We're usually happy with our lot in life, and when we're happy with our lot in life, who needs God after all, right? When I'm doing so well. So in his mind then, this wealthy man says, what am I going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do. He says, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and I will build bigger ones. Great solution. Problem. I will do this and I will do that. Apparently, the barns he currently had weren't big enough to handle the blessings he was about to receive. So the decision to build bigger barns wasn't wrong. Nothing wrong with that. Actually, it was probably a pretty smart idea. In and of itself, it was probably a good business decision. Let's build bigger barns. We need them. Let's build them. So then we can take away from this that wealth in and by itself is not wrong. Nothing wrong with wealth. It just is. There are characters in the Bible who were very wealthy that God used, and they served God well. Job is one of them. Abraham, David, Solomon, Lydia, Matthew. These were all people who were prosperous, and yet God chose to use them. They were people of means, or as we say, they were wealthy. The problem with the individual in this parable lies in the fact that there is no recognition of God at all. In all his plans, he doesn't even use the term God. He doesn't even recognize where his wealth came from. As far as he's concerned in this parable, I produce this wealth. I have a problem in that I don't have barns big enough to handle the wealth that I produced. And so therefore, my solution is that I will build bigger barns. So there is no acknowledgement of God's goodness, no acknowledgement that this blessing came from God and wasn't solely generated. Do we see the problem here? All right, so let's continue diving into this man's mind as he solves this dilemma, this problem that he has. He says, "And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. It's time to relax. It's time to eat. It's time to drink. And it's time to be merry." In other words, it's time to retire. So let me ask a question. Is there anything wrong with retiring? Yeah, not at all. God blesses you with the means so you can retire. I know when Teresa and I are looking forward to our retirement, I think we have enough saved up for about a week. So there is nothing wrong with retiring. It's actually kind of expected. If you're a good money manager and you've done a good job, then you're kind of expected to retire and to enjoy a little relaxation. God expects us to be good stewards of the things that He gives us. Investing and planning and enjoying what we've been given is not only a good idea, but it's actually kind of expected of us if we are good stewards. From a worldly point of view, so let's continue in this worldly way of thinking that this man is running through his gray matter. From a worldly point of view, then, nothing in this parable, this story, is wrong. It's all right. As a matter of fact, if you're living a secular life and you read this story, you're probably saying to yourself, that'll be me someday. Right? That's what I want, and that's what I will achieve. The heart of the problem lies with the man's focus. It wasn't on God. It was on himself, and his heart was in the wrong place. Now let me share a story with you, and this is kind of an example that I share usually when we come to this dilemma in life. When we get a new Christian in the church, they come in, and the first thing you notice about them is they are inward focused. They are the center of their universe. And everything is about them. It's about my pain. It's about my suffering. It's about my issues, my struggles, and all this. And what they notice almost immediately is that those of us who have been here a while are outward focused. We're there to serve them, to wash their feet, to help them, to love on them and care about them. Big difference, right? Huge difference. This is what we're dealing with right here. This man was inward focused. His heart was in the wrong place. People comment all the time when they come in here, what a difference I see in you. I see love, I see care, I see people who care about. So this man's heart was in the wrong place. Let me read from Matthew here. This is Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. And where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what is Jesus saying here? Because this is Jesus also. What is he saying in this? Is he saying, do not plan, don't bother to save, don't bother to invest? No, that's not what he's saying here. What he is saying is, don't let this be your first and only plan. All right, so we walked through this man's process of thinking. He has a problem, he has a solution, and yet the problem will still exist because he doesn't include God in his reasoning. And what's Jesus' response to this? But God said to him, "Fool, for this night your soul is required of you." He says, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you. None of us knows the hour or the day appointed for our death. When it's our time, it's our time." Jesus calls this man a fool, not because he was wealthy, or because he was a smart businessman, or because he wanted to retire and enjoy his wealth. Nothing wrong with any one of those things. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of good things going on there. All these things I think Jesus would have praised under the right conditions. The word fool is only used 4 times in the Gospels, 2 times in Matthew and 2 times in Luke's Gospel. But each time fool is used, Jesus uses the word to describe behavior contrary to God's purpose for the individual. Let me repeat that. When Jesus uses the term fool, it's to imply that this person is doing something contrary to God's purpose for this individual. So then to be foolish is to act out of ignorance of God's desire for your life. And the reality of who God is and what he wants you to be like. That is foolish activity. That's acting like a fool. I heard Dan Rogers once define the term fool, or the word fool, in this way. He said the Greek word is aphron. The A part of the word means without, and the phron part of the word means mind. So put them together and we have without your mind. So Jesus is literally saying here of this individual, this rich person, that he has lost his mind. If we look at Psalms 14:1, we see a very good definition of the word fool, and it's the same word used here in Scripture. It says, "A fool says in his heart, there is no God." So this act of foolishness then, according to Jesus, is not merely a flippant attitude, but instead an obsession that does not include God. Now, Jesus is not saying that wealth is wrong. Let's make sure we understand this. Jesus is not saying wealth is wrong. That's where the parable sometimes trips us up. This is not a parable about selling all of your possessions and then giving all the proceeds to the poor. It's not what this is saying. This is about examining your heart and deciding where your priorities lie. Let's continue the story, and this is verse 21. "So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." There is the solution to the story. Jesus summarizes the problem very nicely, doesn't he? To make it our life's business to live only for our own self-interest, then, is foolishness. To exclude God from our decision-making is foolishness. Not to be rich toward God first and let him take care of blessing us is foolishness. God expects us to be good stewards of what he gives us, of our time, of our talents, of our treasures. And he will not stop testing us as long as we are Christians. He will continue to push us. He will continue to hone us. He will continue to grow us in those areas. Our time, how do we spend our time? Our talents, how do we use the gifts that he's given us? Are we using the gifts that he's giving us? And our treasure, and that could take many forms. You know, one of the things that I joke about a lot, but that red pick-em-up truck that I have, I think other people have driven that more than I have driven it. You know, I was telling someone the other day that and you guys know this, I keep the key in the ignition. If I come home and I find that truck gone, I don't worry about it. People know where the key is. You know, they just come get the truck if they need it, right? As long as they don't dent it. That thing is in pristine condition, so don't dent it. So be very careful about that. But other than that, it's there, right? So how do we use our time, our talents, and our treasures? God expects us to be good stewards of everything that he gives us. And since our God is a giving God, and he loves to give good gifts, being prosperous under his care, right, is a very good thing indeed. The thing we can take away then this morning as we wrap this up, if someone wants to go down and get the kids, that'd be great. As we wrap this up, the thing we can take away from this message this morning then is that we should recognize first and foremost our need to put God first in our lives. When we make decisions, little, bigger, huge decisions, put God first. I remember before I met Teresa, I was dating a young lady, and we had talked about marriage. And I was seriously contemplating marrying this woman. And I remember someone coming up, a couple guys, actually 2 or 3 guys, nudging me saying, you really, really need to think about this and you need to ask God to help you with this decision, because I had made the decision on my own. And I remember saying, okay, and talking to God about it, and he put on my heart that this was a foolish decision. And I remember how painful that was to realize that, because I loved this woman. And to realize God said, no, this is not the woman I have planned for you, was hard. I remember tears streaming down my face and my hands lifted up to God just saying, okay, but you had better get this. You'd better get this right, because I love this woman. I'm going to walk away, but you had better get it right. And he got it right. He honored me. He honored us, Teresa and I, and helped put us together. But it was because I listened to these wise men who came to me and said, put God in the mix. Don't just make the decision on your own. And it was wise advice, right? Really good advice. So the thing we can take away this morning again then is to make sure that on the little decisions, on the bigger decisions, and on the huge decisions, put God first. And then put our needs in his capable hands. And then when he blesses us, at whatever level he blesses us, we should recognize it as his blessing and acknowledge it and be grateful for it. And we should use everything he blesses us with to honor and serve him as best we can. Please join me in prayer. Father, again, we do recognize you. And we also recognize that sometimes our humanity allows us to exclude you in our decision-making and in our day-to-day. And yet I ask, and we ask, that Holy Spirit, you nudge us, you guide us, you help us to remember you in the little things, in the bigger things, and in the huge things. Because it's really, really important that we start out on the right foot, and that is in your loving arms as we go through life, and not out on our own just thinking, how am I going to make this decision? How am I going to do this? But we trust you with the little, the bigger, and the big things. We ask and pray this through your name, Jesus. Amen.